Hello, welcome. This is week 14 of my D&D diary. In the Tomb of Annihilation campaign, my players have just made it to chapters 3 and 4. I've labelled in green all the chapter 3 encounters, and all the chapter 4 encounters are in pink. Hethradar and Aura find themselves looking down on a lost city in the jungle. They see a vision of Asarak destroying the city. When they come down the stairs, they make their way to a guardhouse. They find the remnants of an old red wizard camp, and they can gather some information about the puzzle cubes from the graffiti on the walls. While they're looking around this building, an elven woman teleports in with Torb and Ajan in each of her hands. She explains to the party a few things about the lost city, and she also takes an interest in the ruby rod of Asmodeus, but she doesn't let on that she knows anything about it. She just sees Aura with the rod and notes it down for future dealings. And then she leaves them be. She has to go and sleep. Or so she says. My players make their way into the city, and they quickly make their way over to the giant rift in the lower portion of the city, where a good chunk of the crust has collapsed down into the mantle, and it's just a 200 feet drop into lava. On the other side of this rift, they can see a river that runs through the city, pouring into the rift, and there is a column of earth that is separated on all sides by the rift, and on top of it, it seems to have a shrine to an old god. Close to them, they see a bunch of veggie pygmies, which are like fungus beings. They're like small fungus creatures, and they're holding a small grung as if to sacrifice them. And Ajan, having a very bad experience with the grungs, decides, I'm going to murder the grung before they can sacrifice it, just to start a fight. And so he murders the grung, and the veggie pygmies get upset, and the veggie pygmies attack, and then they slaughter a bunch of veggie pygmies. The veggie pygmies scatter, they're trying to get away, and then they slaughter more of the veggie pygmies. Ajan decides he's going to fly over with Aura, and he's going to take her over to the shrine to give it a look around. But as soon as he starts flying up into the air, a gargoyle notices and flies over to attack him. Aura used the rod to cast lightning bolt and did a ton of damage to the gargoyle, so by the time it got to him, he just cast a couple sun bolts and the gargoyle went down. My players decide, instead of going over to the pillar, they'll explore the rest of the city from the other way around. They go onto the main road of the city, or the main road that's left, and they find a walled compound to their left. So they enter the compound, and they find all these bodies of red wizards that have been slaughtered by a Yuan-ti recently. And they also find a Yuan-ti funeral pyre, and the mark of Dendar, the night serpent, which they all recognize. After poking around the walled compound for a while, they hear some murmured cries for help, and they clear a bit of rubble and they find a man trapped. So they release him, and he thanks them, and he introduces himself. His name is Orvex or Crumus, and he works as a translator for the Red Wizards. If the Red Wizards aren't going to pay him anymore, he's going to leave because he doesn't wish to stay in this cursed city for any longer. Orvex can translate Old Umuan, which is a language that is very important for my players to be able to translate. And so if they keep him around, he will be an exceptional boon. But he's already been a bit of a help. He's told them that the Red Wizards already have one of the 9 puzzle cubes that they need to open the tomb, and he recounts to them the myth of the 9 gods of Chult, which is super important if they want to open the tomb and if they want to complete any of the shrines. And I do like the shrines. The shrines are like little mini games, but we ended that session there, so hopefully next session we will do a bunch of shrines and we'll just have a good time. In the Curse of Strahd campaign, now that the Lady Watcher has taken over Valakai, the people of Valakai can find a little bit of stability and peace after the massacre that occurred the previous day. People are starting to rebuild, we make it back to the tavern. Many people are here mourning, drowning their sorrows with wine. Among the people here, we notice the two Watcher brothers, Nikolai and Carl. And we go and we sit with them and we chat. We talk about the future of Valakai with Lady Watcher as the leader. Well, we take a short rest basically, but I didn't need a short rest, so I took a bit of time to learn my sword and what it can do. And as I was attuning to my new magic sword, it pricked me, and suddenly the patches of grey skin that have been slowly growing just completely fill out the rest of my body, and I turn completely grey. I have completely transformed back into a dusk elf. Although I'm still a half elf, I'm just a half dusk elf rather than a half high elf. I start to learn that dusk elves are sort of outcast in Valakai, and people start giving me looks, so I start putting my hood up a bit more. I was in talks with the rest of my party about maybe having a bit of a spar so I could learn the weight of my new weapon. It has increased in size. And so Magnus agrees to fight me with swords just to have a bit of a spar. Nikolai overhears this and challenges me to a duel. And I agree heartily. I would love to verse another swordsman, and he also wields a rapier, which would be perfect. We go out the back, and there's a little bit of an area that is meant for sparring, and so we take up there. The entire party come to watch, a bunch of other in-guests come to watch, just to see what we're doing. The spar starts off, and he says to me, "I'll go easy on you, but once you draw first blood, you'll feel my full wrath." I explain, "Look, I'm just here to learn my weapon, have a good time." And so we start to fight, and he lands a few attacks on me. I get pushed back. I actually take a lot of damage. I manage to fight back and get a shot on him. Eventually, when it seems like he has the upper hand, he turns around and sheaths his rapier, puts his hands behind his head, and he's like, "You get a free shot. Take it." And I say to him, look, I'm not here to attack you. I hold my action, so if he does anything, I'll retaliate. But I'm not there to start a fight. He respects this, and then we have a cordial duel, and I end up the victor. And he's like, "Oh, let's have another round." And so we do another round, and right before the end, right before I'm about to beat him again, his sword glows bright yellow. He manages to knock my rapier out of my hand with his magic weapon and then pins me with it. And that was the end of the second bout. And it was a much more resounding victory than the previous one. So Nikolai was declared the victor overall. Upon seeing this, Magnus is like, "Look, okay, I'm gonna fight you, Nikolai." And so he comes in with his great sword, and Nikolai agrees to fight him. They go toe to toe for a bit, and then Magnus decides that he's going to use his spiritual guardians. They're going to come out and harry Nikolai and give him disadvantage. But when he does so, Nikolai uses some sort of soul magic or something to trap his guardians in place and pin Magnus with magic. And he's like, "Don't use that magic with me," and just stabs him and does a ton of damage. Magnus goes down. It's a resounding victory for Nikolai, and we bring Magnus back, and we're like, "Whoa, what happened?" And he's like, he cheated, he was using magic or whatever. But most people at the tavern agreed that Nikolai had won both fights. After that spot of fun, we had a bit of a spa day. We decided that we would head to the lake to see if we could potentially find the town drunk who was said to have gone there. He's been missing for a few days, so it's a good chance he's dead. But, we might see some things at the lake, who knows. We make our way down to the lake, and there are a few boats there, and we see a man with a fishing pole in the middle of the lake. And we stay there for a bit, and we watch this man from a distance, and then we see him get up and lift a sack that seems to have someone inside it because it's wriggling around and it's squirming. And he throws the sack into the water and watches it sink. Upon seeing this, everyone jumps in a boat. Marek jumps in a boat with Magnus, and Magnus paddles while Marek watches. Claxton and Jahazar jump in the next boat, and then Ivan and I jump in the third boat. And the DM makes us roll some skill checks. Ivan and I ace our skill checks, and we power ahead. But then obviously Magnus and Jahazar, with the really good strength scores, manage to catch up towards the end. And I dive down into the water. I have a wisdom of -1. The DM gets me to make a perception check to see if I can find the sack. And it's like a 5. My next perception check, even worse. And my last perception check, I believe, was a critical failure. So I see nothing. Magnus, on the other hand, manages to jump down, swim all the way to the bottom, swim back up with the sack, passes his strength check, and puts the sack onto the boat. Meanwhile, on the water, Ivan has made it to the man. We figure out that this man is Bluto, and he explains that he has to make a sacrifice to the lake so that the lake will give him fish. And he needs fish in order to pay for all the wine that he drinks. And we ask him, oh, well, what did you sacrifice? And he's like, one of those filthy Vistanis. Ivan, being a Vistani, whacks him in the head with the hammer, rolls a critical hit, and caves in his skull. This is a little bit of a super violent reaction, and we are rightfully shocked by this. That player's character's alignment shifts to neutral evil. At this point, Magnus is back with the body, and we find that it's dead. Ivan attempts to do a cure wounds, but it's no use. Jahazar prays to the Morning Lord, and the Morning Lord answers his prayers and brings back this Vistani girl to life. She couldn't be older than 10. She's a young Vistani girl. We bring her back to the shore, along with Bluto's body. I stay in the boat with Bluto while Ivan has a boat to himself. I kind of didn't want to share a boat with him after he murdered a man, just straight up caved his skull in. We make it to the shore and we talk to the little girl. We bury Bluto at the shore of the lake. It turns out that this girl is Arabelle, the niece of Aravel. I think it's Aravel, the man who offered me rum if I bought a toy from Blinksies for Arabelle. I did have the toys from Blinksies, but I thought to honor my bargain, I would have to give it to Aravel so that he could then give it to his niece. But upon talking and spending a little bit of time with Arabelle, it's clear she detests being treated like a child. She really enjoys being taken seriously and is not one to be patronized. We take her to the Vistani camp on the other side of town. We have to walk through a small territory where there are a bunch of dusk elves. I kind of keep myself hidden, but it's really hard to hide when you are the prince of the dusk elves and they're all like eyeing you like, who is this guy? We make it to the Vistani camp and they are in a process of mourning the loss of the camp leader's child, Arabelle. But we rock up with Arabelle and we're like, no, we saved her from Bluto. She's here. The Vistani camp leader was so overjoyed and overwhelmed that we had saved his daughter. He offered to repay us with some of their great treasures. While this negotiation was going down, I took Aravel, Arabelle's uncle, aside and I showed him the toys that I got from Blinksies. And I showed him the doll, but upon meeting Arabelle, I think she might like this better. I give him the babushka dolls, where the doll gets older and older and eventually it's a coffin in the middle. And I collapse the dolls down, I give it to him, and I say, I think Arabelle will really like this toy. Aravel thanks me and he says, I can offer you one of the treasures from the treasure wagon if you'd like. And I said, no thank you, I'm all good. I'm just here for that rum. He takes me round to his personal tent and he's like, do you have like a flask or anything? I do have a flask, but it's full of holy water. So I take out my water skin, I tip it out, and I'm like, well, you could use this. And he's like, I'm very sorry, I only have these 2 casks. And I said, may I purchase one of the casks? And he says, no, I can give it to you if you'd like. And I say, I would very much like that. And he gives me a 10-liter cask of rum. And so when I show up back to the party, I'm just holding like a 10-liter cask under one of my arms. The warlock had managed to negotiate with the Vistani. Even though we weren't paying for any of these treasures, he'd managed to negotiate with the Vistani. They agreed to give us a second treasure. And so there's all these different treasures. One of them is definitely a flying carpet, and the party didn't choose it. Instead, they chose the small, unassuming little wooden box. They also chose a jade box. And with the unassuming box, they're like, oh, no. He's like, I wouldn't want to swindle you after saving my daughter. I have to tell you, it's a Vistani secret, but we sell these potions that allow you to go through the mist, but they don't actually work. And if you choose that wooden box, it's just full of these worthless potions. Rather than take that box, we take a metal box as well. And so inside the metal box is like 1,000 gold pieces or something crazy. I don't know, the warlock basically handles all our finances, and then he'll just rock up and he'll be like, here's 10 gold for you, here's 10 gold for you, 100 gold for me, you know. But it works out really well. He's really good at swindling people, and since he is chaotic neutral, he doesn't have any qualms with that at all. And in the jade box, there is a bunch of really nice jewelry that the warlock is like, cool, yeah, I'm gonna keep this. And we check it, and it's not magical, as far as we can tell. The warlock Claxton manages to negotiate one more of the treasures if we bring the Vistani, I believe it's like something like 12 barrels of wine. While this is happening, Jahazar and Claxton realize something about Aravel, and they realize that Aravel was the man who gave them Strahd's letter that enticed them out into the woods where they got caught in the mist in the first place. They realize that Aravel is the man that brought them to Barovia in the first place, and they confront him about this, and he says, well, you know, I'm just doing my job. That's just what I do. They seem satisfied with that answer, so they don't question him further on it. It's starting to get dark. We leave the Vistani camp, and again, I'm accosted by the Dusk Elves, and I say to them, look, I don't know who you think I am, but I am not like some sort of savior. I don't have any like false hope. I will be back in a couple days. We will talk then. We head back to the tavern, and we stop at the tavern briefly, and then we head on to Lady Watch's house. She's having this magnificent dinner, and everyone's there in very formal getup, but most of us are slightly damp. I have a cask of rum. We're coming in, we're sort of bogans coming in. The door lady greets Magnus and ushers us in. Now, I'm still a little bit skeptical about Lady Watcher, so I decide I'm gonna check to see if I think the food is poisoned. And I rolled a nat 20, and he's like, you can't see anything, you don't smell anything. And I'm like, boys, it's iocane powder. It's 100% iocane powder. Since Jose believes there's nothing in this food, he gobbles it up. At the dinner, we discuss the future of Valakai. The lady tells us that she had a treasure that she was going to share with us, but unfortunately it had been stolen the previous day. We deduce that this is probably Strahd's journal that we stole earlier that day. We talk about the future of Valakai, and she tells us of her plans to, with our help, bring sunlight back to Valakai. And she talks openly of her devotion to Orcus, and so does Magnus, and Claxton also pretends to be a follower of Orcus because he has an Orcus pendant, and when he calls his staff to him, his patron makes his staff look like it's a staff of Orcus. I haven't explained this before, but Magnus is still wearing an eye bandage because he had previously showed his loyalty to Orcus by taking a pin that Lady Watcher had given him, an inch-long pin, and sticking it directly into his eye. And when he came back the next day, he's like, what is this pin supposed to do? And Lady Watcher was just like, the prophecy said that if they were the one, they would be bold and take risks and wouldn't ask questions. And that's exactly what Magnus is. He put a pin in his eye before he even knew what it does. So he takes the pin out and it just starts bleeding. But this is all backstory. Jose doesn't know this, but it'll probably never come up again, and I really like that. I like that that was just a thing that happened. After having a bit of a discussion, we seem like this is great. We're going to really have a good time constructing a better Valakai for the citizens of Valakai, and we have this powerful ally in Lady Watcher and the Watcher House. And when we stand up to leave, the poison kicks in and we all fall unconscious. We wake up over 24 hours later to the full moon. It's been a day and it is now the next night. We find ourselves without our weapons and our packs in the town square, where a bunch of Watcher's followers are standing on a large pentagram and Lady Watcher is speaking some ritual. In our days, we slowly start to get up and Lady Watcher finishes her ritual and the ground opens up and fire burns out from it, and all of the followers die horrible deaths as Orcus himself starts climbing out of the pit. Now, it is not Orcus himself, it is an avatar of Orcus, but for the 4th level people that we are, it may as well have been Orcus. And fire bursts out from Orcus, and these ghouls spring to life around the town square, and Lady Watcher is still there, like, summoning Orcus as he climbs out of the pit. And the DM plonks down this giant Orcus mini, and it's some fresh times. We spend the first few turns sort of getting our directions back after coming out of this long sleep, and thankfully the DM gave us a long rest just because we had been asleep for the last 24 or so hours. Magnus grabs his weapons, runs over, and starts to attack the avatar of Orcus. Being a follower of Orcus, he sort of understands that this is not Orcus himself. This is an avatar, this is a cheap ritual, this isn't actually Orcus. One dead giveaway is that Orcus has the wand of Orcus, where he could summon an army of undead every turn, just like forever. The rest of the party sort of gets a little caught up with fighting these ghouls. There is one ghoul that goes after Claxton, another that goes after Marek, and one that goes after Ivern. Jahazar comes over and helps Ivern. I go to help Claxton and then realize that I don't have any weapons and I have to go run over to get my weapon. After a first few rounds of initiative, the warlock, Claxton, finds himself in a little bit of a hard place between a ghoul and Lady Watcher. This is when Roach comes in his new form as a hellhound, and runs in and rips out Lady Watcher's throat. And Lady Watcher goes down, and then he like whirls around. On the next turn, he manages to use his fire breath and burns the ghoul as well as Claxton. The ghoul and Claxton go down. He doesn't mean to kill Claxton, but that just happens. Ivern runs over and reses Claxton, and Jose, Jahazar, and Magnus go in and harry the avatar of Orcus. After many rounds of fighting, with Orcus flying up into the air and coming back down, he lets out this poison spray. That downs me and Ivern. And Ivern's players, like, if we didn't have that long rest, I would have been outright dead. Magnus comes in and deals the killing blow to Orcus, which is perfect because Orcus is like his master. Not only that, another thing about Magnus is he's also half a vampire, which I totally called, and he reveals his vampire self. He shows his fangs, and he like bites into Orcus, and then it kills him and disembowels him, and his spirits come out of him. Ivan and I are rezzed by the paladin, and that is where we ended that session. We played from 6 p.m. to 2 p.m, so we played for a good 8 hours, and the DM had a painted mini for Orcus, he had a painted mini for the Hellhound that ran in. He had all these plates spinning and managed to keep them spinning, and it was just really well executed. It was probably one of the best sessions I've ever played in. Because he's doing milestone leveling, he says at the end of it all, we are now level 5. That was Curse of Strahd, and that was week 14. Have a really nice day.